Hello everyone. So let's talk about inflation today. Have you ever wondered what is inflation? Have you ever wondered how that affects your life? Have you ever wondered where it comes from? We will find that out today in this video. So what is inflation exactly? See, inflation basically measures how quickly the prices of goods and services are rising. What does that mean? If we can take an example to understand this further. Let's suppose today the price of an iPhone is 50,000 rupees and next year the same iPhone is getting sold at 55,000 rupees. So that's an increment of 10% over 1 year. We would say that the prices of iPhone have inflated by 10% this year. Now, why is this data important? It is important because let's say you are someone who has 100 rupees today and you find it okay to live with 100 rupees per day in 2024. I know it's not possible, but let's assume that. So, ये जो आपका 100 रुपया है, this will become less than 100 rupees in the next 1 to 2 years. Why? Because the buying power of 100 rupees goes down. So you will nominally or mathematically have the same amount of money. You will not be able to buy the same things with the 100 rupees that you have today. If you want to give it a bit more context, people used to earn 10 rupees, 50 rupees, 100 rupees in 1960s and 70s, and that used to be enough for them to survive. That used to be enough for them to pay for their house. That used to be enough for them to buy clothes. That used to be enough for food, education, weddings, everything that a person does in his life. If I say that today that I will give you 100 rupees a month, will you be able to survive even for, I don't know, 6 hours? Not really. So that's what inflation has done to us. It reduces the buying power of our currency. The value of our currency goes down and down every year, which means that if we have money today and if we keep that in the locker, inflation is going to eat away that money. That is the basic concept of inflation. Now, the next question you might ask is, where does this come from? Why do we have inflation at all? It sounds horrible. Why do we allow inflation to come into our system? Well, there are 3 kinds of inflation, and if you understand 3 of them, you will understand the place of inflation in an economy and how we can't really avoid inflation. So number 1 is the demand pull. Now, what does that mean? Let's try to understand that with an example. Now, let's suppose that people today are earning 100 rupees, right? And there are 100 people. So the total money in the economy is 10,000 rupees. Only 10,000 rupees exist in this economy this month. Now, if the entire economy has only 10,000 rupees, so what would that mean? People will be very cautious to spend even 1 rupee. You might get a coffee at 1 paisa, maybe less. You might be able to buy a house for 100 rupees. No problem. But now let's say tomorrow I get 5,000 rupees. Everyone is making 5,000 rupees, right? So suddenly the whole economy has about 5 lakh rupees a month to spend. So if I have 5 lakh rupees for a month to spend, but in this particular month, has the number of coffee producers increased? Probably not. Has the supply of land increased? Probably not. Has the supply of bricks increased? Probably not. Right? So people will have to pay more. You might end up paying, I don't know, maybe 2 rupees for a coffee. You might end up paying 1,000 rupees for the same house. Why does this happen? Basically, it's economics 101. More money creates demand. Even in your personal life, if you think about it, let's say you used to earn 50,000 rupees 5 years back, and today you're earning 1 lakh rupees. Are you able to save the entire 50,000 rupees today? Probably not. The cost of your lifestyle has increased. Yesterday, if you're spending 20,000 rupees on rent, just because you're earning more, you are willing to spend 30,000 rupees on rent without realizing the cost of your lifestyle is increasing, inflation has come into effect. There's another kind of inflation called cost push inflation. As the name suggests, this inflation comes because the underlying raw material or a manufactured product is going up in price, and which is driving the whole ecosystem to drive their price further up. Now, one example could be the semiconductor crisis that we saw in 2020, right? Semiconductors are primarily manufactured in Taiwan. In COVID, what happened is that we saw a lot of supply constraints. Now, because of these supply constraints, because people who were on the ship, they had to go home because of COVID. People did not know what is going to happen. There was kind of an indefinite leave that people went on during COVID. What that resulted in is delay in shipments, delay in logistics, which is why semiconductors market went through a very big supply disruption. This made the prices of semiconductors go up, right? Because if semiconductors are not available in the market, then people will be ready to pay more to procure the remaining semiconductors. Let's say today there are 1 million units of semiconductors available in 2019. Due to the supply constraint, let's say now only 100k units are available, right, in 2020. And if you are an Apple, right, or if you're Dell, or if you're Samsung, you don't want to miss out on the limited supply of semiconductors. So you will be able to say that, okay, fine, I will give you more money for the semiconductors. Please don't stop my supply. Apple, in return, will charge their customers more. A 50,000 iPhone will sell for 80,000 rupees today, right? So this is called a cost push inflation. This is kind of unavoidable. This happens due to unforeseen circumstances, and it is fairly easy to understand. There is an inbuilt inflation in our human psychology. Now, what does that mean? That means that let's say today you are earning 100 rupees a month in your corporate job. Come March, you will expect your employer to give you 106 rupees from here on, maybe 110 rupees from here on, maybe 120 rupees from here on. But what has changed? Has the business started making a lot more money? Do you actually go and check the annual report of your company if they can afford to pay you that much? No, right? It's your psychology that you expect growth in your life. You want to do more in your life. And because of this inbuilt psychology that we have, this inflation has to take place in any economy. Imagine a farmer, imagine a businessman, imagine a builder, imagine anyone in the economy who's doing any kind of job. He would want more and more prices for the goods that they supply or the services that they supply because they want to grow in life. Now this causes a rise in prices every year. And this is what we call inbuilt inflation. This is extremely unavoidable. And frankly, if this was not happening, then you would not be very happy in life. So what we have to accept here is that inflation is a part of our economy, inflation is a part of our life, and inflation is a very, very important part of our investment journey as well. Another thing that we need to talk about is the supply of money and supply of credit. Now, supply of money is governed by central banks. How do they control the supply of money? Basically, they have something called a repo rate. Now, repo rate is something at which banks can borrow from central banks. It is actually more complicated than that. But अभी के लिए समझ लेते हैं कि repo rate पे banks को पैसा मिलता है from central banks as जैसे आप लोन लेते हैं बैंक से at an interest rate. Imagine repo rate to be that interest rate जिस पे बैंक central bank से लोन लेता है. Now you have to understand how this repo rate changes the supply of money. For this you have to understand कि बैंक कैसे पैसा कमाता है. बैंक सेंट्रल बैंक से लेट से 100 रुपीज़ लेगा एंड देन वो 100 लोगों को 1-1 रुपये का लोन दे देगा. नाउ इफ दिस इज बीइंग टेकन बाय द बैंक फ्रॉम सेंट्रल बैंक एट 6% एंड बैंक गिव्स यू दिस लोन एट 8%, so bank has just created an income of 2% every year, राइट. सो बेसिकली अगर सेंट्रल बैंक ने ये रेट कम कर दिया, सेंट्रल बैंक ने बोला नाउ द रेपो रेट इज़ ओनली 5%. So banks are happy with their 2%. They can't really charge more or keep charging 8% because then some other bank will start charging at 7%, right? So competition ऐसा होता है that all of them have to kind of give similar rates, right? So you will always observe the biggest banks giving home loan at a similar rate, right? So for example, home loan would somewhere be around 8% to 9%, 9.5% in all big banks. When the repo rate comes down, this 8 to 9% thing will come down to 6 to 7%. Well, not 6%, but let's say 7 to 8%, right? So that is how it happens. Now imagine this particular individual who had taken 1 rupee of loan at 8%. Tomorrow he finds out that now he is going to get loans at 7%. For him, credit became cheaper. अब उसको समझ में आएगा कि मैं तो और लोन ले सकता हूँ बिकॉज ये तो सस्ता पड़ रहा है मुझे. टाइम उसकी EMI लेट से 5 पैसा per month थी, this will now become 4 paisa per month or whatever, right? So his monthly obligation has gone down. His income is still whatever 80,000, let's say 80 rupees or whatever. So उसको सस्ता पड़ेगा ये लेना. So he will take more and more of loans. Through this, what happens is money starts flowing in the economy more and more as the repo rate keeps dropping. What does that mean? That means more economic activity. How come more economic activity? Because people take this loan and they spend it somewhere, right? And people who are able to sell to these people, they further spend it somewhere else. And that's how economic activities keep increasing. But हो क्या रहा है कि supply of money बढ़ रही है. Now supply of money will mean more inflation. It is central bank's duty to make sure that inflation is in check. So let's say the GDP is increasing at a certain rate, let's say at 8%, but inflation is getting out of control. It is getting overheated. तो सेंट्रल बैंक क्या करेंगे? वापस रेपो रेट को बढ़ा देंगे. So then what will happen? People will start taking less credit from banks. So that what will happen? The supply of money will go down. So then what will happen? Economic activity will go down. Inflation will go down and things will come under control. And then when the banks feel that economic activity कुछ ज़्यादा ही कम हो रही है, they will again make the repo rate go down, which will then mean more credit, which will then mean more supply of money, which will then mean more economy, right? This is how inflation is controlled by the central banks. In India's case, this is RBI, right? And the repo rate tends to be around 6% usually. But if you remember during COVID, because the economic activities had gone down so much, people were hoarding money because they were afraid of what's going to happen. Central banks reduced the repo rate, right? Up to 4%, I think, 4 or 4.5%. And that meant cheaper loans. So whenever the repo rates go down, it is invariable that people tend to spend more because credit becomes very easy, right? So this is what you have to keep in mind as an investor. This is very, very important. Another thing that is very important here is called sector inflation. Now what happens generally is that whenever we plan our investments, we think that the inflation rate is only 6%. So for example, let's say you are doing 100 rupees of investment today, in an asset which gives 12% return, right? So this money will become 200 rupees in 6 years. How come 6 years? So there's a rule called rule of 72. So अगर आप 72 को rate of interest से divide करेंगे तो you will get 6. Now this 6 means it will double in 6 years. This is the rule of 72. Now they think that this 200 rupees would have inflated at 6%. Why? Because the RBI tells us that the inflation is around 6-7%. This could not be further from the truth. Because what are we actually saving for, right? We are saving for major life goals. That is retirement. We are saving towards weddings. If not yours, then your child's. You're saving for education. Again, if not yours, your child's. We are saving for your car, your house, right? You're saving for unforeseen medical expenses. Now, living expenses, okay, let's assume that RBI is right. It is only increasing at 6%, and this is the major corpus, right? About 50% of your money will go towards retirement, let's say, for example. But weddings are increasing at 10 to 15% a year. your education costs are increasing at almost 20% a year. And how do I know this 20%? If you actually look at what I paid for my schooling in 2010 was 12,000 rupees per year. Today that same school charges 120,000 per year. That's 18% CAGR, right? So education has actually gone up by a mile. Car costs have increased, right? Has gone through a very high inflation of about, I would say, 15% a year. Your house prices have increased by about 9 to 10% a year. Your medical expenses will go up by about 10 to 15% every year. So now these numbers are well above your traditional 6%, like way above 6%. If you actually sit down and do the math, you will find that the inflation rate is actually at about 10 to 11%. This is very important. If your returns are not making 10 to 11% a year, then you are losing money. Finally, let's talk about what can we do as investors so that inflation works for us and not against us, right? So the only way that you can make inflation work for you is by holding tangible assets, right? So what does tangible asset mean? Anything that can be put a value on, right? Very easily. So for example, a house, right? Some kind of property. Let's say a rental property, right? For let's say you have stocks, you have some gold, right? Gold is usually a decent hedge. Actually, gold index has not performed as well against the CPI for many years, but recently it has actually, I think, surpassed CPI by a bit. So because the gold prices have risen uncontrollably over the last 5 to 7 years. So gold is also a good asset to hold against inflation. Basically, what will happen is that if inflation is increasing, the price of your house will increase, the price of your rentals will increase, price of your stocks will increase, price of your gold will increase. So this is the kind of assets that you want to hold. What you do not want to hold is cash, right? You don't want to hold a lot of deposits, right? You don't want to typically invest in schemes like EPF, NPS, right, which offer about 8 to 10%, because this is well below the 10 to 11% inflation mark that we talked about, right? If you do the math, this will not be very productive for you. So you should really avoid investing in schemes like EPF and NPS. Invest in stocks, invest in property rentals, invest in house. Another way of looking at it is that you invest in some high risk assets. So what does high risk asset mean? This means some unlisted stocks, some cryptocurrencies. You don't want to park a lot of money here, but I would suggest around 5 to 10% of your portfolio should go in very high risk assets, so that they can naturally someday reward you in a way where inflation then does not become a topic of conversation. It exceeds that, it transcends that topic of conversation. I hope you liked the video today. I will be doing more such videos about investments and about macroeconomics so that you guys can learn and implement the same things in your life. If you want to keep listening to such commentary, then please consider subscribing to my channel. I am a new creator here, but every help that I can get from you will be highly appreciated. I hope you enjoyed the session today, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.